What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Colt and Posey Fishing. Today we're going to talk about pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn fish. We got all three going on right now in the lakes. We've had some beautiful weather, beautiful days. We've also had a lot of rain, so a lot of your lakes are flooded. And some of you guys are struggling as far as finding fish on the lakes that are flooded. Don't feel bad, it happens to everybody, but I'm going to help you locate those fish to where you can put some fish in your boat. So stay tuned, this is something you don't want to miss. Don't forget, if you like the content that I'm putting out, if you think it's valuable, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, drop down below and hit the subscribe button. Helps me out a whole lot. I always bring new content to you every Saturday, or every Sunday, I'm sorry. So the first thing we're going to talk about the pre-spawn fish. So this has been going on for quite a while, but you're still going to have those pre-spawn fish. I typically like to target those fish just because they're the most healthy and they're just a lot easier to catch, because in my profession I want to catch as many fish as I can to give me a bigger limit. Those fish that are pre-spawn, they're still going to have the eggs and everything in their bellies. They're going to be fuller, fatter, the whole 9 yards. So one of the first lures I definitely like to target these fish with. Now, some of these baits, don't get me wrong, some of these baits are going to overlap into the post-spawn. So just don't let this throw you off. So one of the first ones is a swim bait. So my swim bait rod that I use most of the time, I like a Duckett Green Ghost. This is a 7'3" medium heavy action rod. It just works really well. I like a little bit longer rod, that way I can get a really far cast. The reel that I use on this one, this is the Lose Mock Speed Spool. I've had this reel for a while. I just enjoy it. I like it a lot. It's a good reel. But I use the Strike King Squadron swim bait head. I'm either going to a 1/4 or 3/8 ounce. It depends on what I'm fishing. So if I'm on a secondary point and that secondary point is deep, let's say it's 25 to 30 foot deep, and those fish are close to the bottom, then I'm going to go to like 3/8 ounce. Now, if they're pushed up on the point and in the shallower water where it's 5 to 10 foot deep, something like that, I'll go to the 1/4 ounce. So the swim bait that I use on this most of the time is the Strike King Rage Swimmer. This is the green pumpkin pearl belly. I use it when the water's clear and we got blue sunny days. Those bright blue, beautiful days that you want to be out on the water and the water's clear. I'm using the green pumpkin and pearl belly. If the water's stained or dirty, I'll go to a black and blue or a solid white. But the size that I use is 3.75. That's the key, because it's going to catch small fish and it's going to catch big fish. So now the type of line that I like to throw on this, I run 15-pound Seaguar. I like a Braid, but if you don't want to spend the extra money, Red Label's good. But you want a good fluorocarbon line. I don't want a whole lot of stretch. And the key to catching fish on a swim bait, this is where a lot of people mess up and they miss a lot of fish. You get excited, you feel that bite where it's like a spinnerbait bite, that tick, 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 and then all people react the same way. They try to set the hook like crazy, like you would on a worm or something like that. What you want to do, you're going to feel that tick. Keep reeling, and when your line tightens up, that's when you know the fish has got it in its mouth. Pull into them. So I'm going to do a sweeping action. I'm going to come straight across and reel at the same time. That's going to drive that hook into that fish's mouth. You're not going to lose near as many fish. You're going to catch 99% of the fish that you get bites with. So that's my first setup for pre-spawn bass. Okay, another great setup for pre-spawn bass, a fluke. So the way I do my fluke, I don't know if most people rig it up like this, but this is just the way I rig it up and my setup. I've got a 6'9" medium fast action Duckett Green Ghost. Okay, the medium action is really the big key, because a lot of times when they bite your fluke, they're only going to get the back end of it, and you want to give them that parabolic bend to where they can suck that bait in and get it down in their mouth to where you can set the hook on them. Because I'm using a 3/0 Gamakatsu hook, and all I'm doing is taking a Yum breaking shad, or what people would call a fluke. I'm typically sticking to the white colors, and I'm just doing like a standard Texas rig. And basically I use this bait to skip up under docks, skip up in brush, things of that nature. The reason I do that, that fluke, I can pull it through so much cover, and I can get those fish to react that's inside of cover. So like if you're going around a channel swing where the fish will typically be on a pre-spawn situation, a lot of times you got brush piles and stuff in the water. That's where your fluke's going to shine. You can throw it up in the brush and work it straight off of the bank out into the brush, and 9 times out of 10 those fish are going to come up out of the brush or whatever type of cover that you have on there. That's going to be a key this time of year, guys. Look for your hard covers. They're going to be all over hard covers. The obvious stuff that you see on the bank, that's what they're going to be in. Now, they're going to be hit by a bunch of different stuff. Stuff like this, you can finesse those fish into biting or make them react into biting. So that's another little setup. I'm going to show you another one real quick that I enjoy to use this time of year. I catch a lot of fish off of it. All right, so basically the last setup that I use during pre-spawn, and I catch a lot of fish off of this bait during this time of year. It's a jerk bait. So as you can see, this is like the 4.75 inch Strike King KVD jerk bait. And the only reason I will use the one that dives to 10 foot like this one is if you're up there and you see on the front of your graph where it's showing like a line on top of the water. Basically what that is some kind of particles that's in the water that creates a cloud. Okay, it's basically, think of it like the top of the water is the sky, and right below it is some clouds in the water. And what that does, that provides an ambush point for the fish. They will actually sit up in that cloudy water and look straight down. So a lot of times you're fishing right over the top of them and doesn't even know it, or going right by them because they can't find it. So if I have that situation because of a mud line or something like that in the water, I will go to like the 10 foot, because this right here will dive below it, and those fish will be looking down and they'll swim straight down and hit it. So I had that situation happen a lot yesterday, a lot. So the other jerk bait that I use, this is the same jerk bait. It's just the, I believe it's like a 3-inch or something like that. But anyways, it's the smaller one out of the whole lineup, and this thing dives to like 4 foot. So I'm using this in the more clearer water situations, because most of the time those fish are going to be sitting on bottom, or not on bottom, they're going to be suspended, but they'll be looking up. This bait right here, you're working it as fast as possible. You're not giving it a break. If I pause this thing, it's for a split second. They're going to hit this pure out of reaction. You'll catch a lot of big fish off this bait this time of year. Okay guys, so now we're going to move into the spawn transition. So we've been talking about pre-spawn a lot. I hope you kind of got an idea of the areas that you need to cover. Your secondary points, your channel swings, humps, you know, out in the middle of your creeks and stuff like that. That's going to hold your pre-spawn fish. The mouths of creeks is a great spot for spotted bass. A lot of times they spawn very early or they'll spawn very late. So you can kind of find a mixture there at all times. So the spawn, let's talk about spotted bass spawning. Spotted bass will spawn anywhere from 5 to 10 foot. They spawn a lot deeper than largemouth will, especially on your clear lakes like Smith Lake and places like that, Lake Lanier, all them. They're going to feed or spawn in deeper water. Your Coosa River spots, not so much. They'll spawn, you know, like a typical largemouth would, but they'll be closer out towards the main lake. So the baits that I choose to target these spawning fish with is, one of them is a pegged weight Texas rig. So I've got just a standard Texas rig, but I got the weight pegged, and I typically use like a Yum Money Crawl. So it's long like a worm, but it's got the crawls on it. This bait, I just don't think people throw it a whole lot, so the fish doesn't see it a whole lot, so it kind of helps. You can kind of throw it all the way down the bank and catch some pre-spawners, post-spawners, but I really use this bait a lot working it on the bed. And you just standard Texas rig it, throw it in there, you know, make your pitches, work the bed, see if you can get the fish to bite. This bait right here is a big key. It mimics a crawfish, which in a bass's mind is, of course, a type of protein that they need to eat, but during this time of year, it's also a predator towards their eggs, so they become real aggressive towards it. My setup that I like to use, I prefer a medium heavy rod as long as it's 7 foot or a little bit longer. The reel that I like to use, this is Daiwa Fugo. I like an 8-1-1 gear ratio. I want it as fast as possible because I need to take up line quick. So that's basically my setup for the Texas rig for spawning fish. Okay guys, so sticking to the spawn, this one has a lot to do with when those fish are in that deep cover. I like using a Strike King Hack Attack heavy covered jig. It's a swim jig. And the reason I really like this bait, I can skip it. I can do a lot of things with this bait. I can work it like a normal jig. I can swim it and do the whole 9 yards. It's one of those versatile baits that you need during the pre-spawn, post-spawn, and the spawning. I can put this on the bed, work it. I can, you know, go through brush and all that stuff really well. When your water's stained, I like the black and blue color. When it's not stained, I like the green pumpkin and the orange. That kind of mimics a bluegill, and the blue also mimics a bluegill, but makes it a little bit easier to see when the fish are spawning. The setup now that I like to use, this is a 7'4" it's a heavy action, heavy action Duckett Triad. I really like these rods specifically for this, just because it's got the micro guides on it. This allows me to make a real accurate cast into that cover or around the cover and stuff like that. Now on the swim jig part, there's one trailer that I specifically use throughout the rest of the year outside of winter. Now this is a Yum crawl chunk, and you can buy them in a couple different sizes. I like the bigger chunk sizes, 3.75 inch, and you know, this is the Virgo blue. It's got a little bit of red in it, and it's got that blue, so this mimics the crawfish really well. You can swim it. It's got a different action when you're working that crawl. So instead of the crawls actually moving like this, they kind of twist. So when it's moving through the water, instead of doing like this, it's doing like this. And it's just a really different erratic action that helps make those fish react to the bait. So stay tuned. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where to find those spawning fish. This is a big key. A lot of people don't look in the right places. So, all right, guys, so places that I look for spawning fish, people will tell you North Coves and stuff like that. That is true. They will get up in the northern side of the banks and stuff to be protected from northern winds. The best way to find spawning fish is to get on whatever weather app you use and look and see when the wind is going to be the highest coming out of the north. That's the day you need to be on the water. So, and on that day, I'm not necessarily cruising down the bank looking for spawners. I'm looking for locations for when the wind is calm that I can target those spawners. So the situation that we dealt with yesterday, we had about a 20-mile-an-hour wind coming out of the northwest. And this is typical when it's post-frontal conditions. I mean, but anyways, basically what you want to do is ride around in these coves and creeks and stuff and see where the calm water is. That's all you need to do. Look where the calm water is in those creeks and coves, mark it, and then come back on a calm day. And then you can drop that trolling motor. You want to turn it on as low as you can because you don't want to spook the fish. We was trying to find bedfish yesterday. We just, every time we would see one, we was already too close, and you know, we'd spook them with the trolling motor every time. But that's what happens when you deal with those high wind situations, pollen on the water, the whole 9 yards. Plus the water was stained up pretty bad. So you couldn't really make out a lot of what you were seeing. So it just happens like that. But after you mark those locations to where you think they're going to spawn out of the wind and stuff like that, go back on those days that it's not real windy and stuff, And then you want to just sight fish. You're going to cruise around with your trolling motor on low, turn your fish finder off. There's no reason to have it on. I mean, you're not going to be fishing 20 foot. You're going to be in, you know, real shallow water, especially if you're looking for largemouth. So you're just going to cruise along, look for hard pieces of cover from the spawn on, little offsets in the water, like maybe a little bit of buckbrush and stuff. They'll spawn right on the edge of that. If your water's high, you're definitely going to have to wait till, you know, the water clears up and stuff where you can see, because those fish are not going to move their beds just because the water level went up for a few days. They're just not going to do it. So if your water's real clear, it should be no issue. But there again, you know, do like I said, take your time, go slow. This time of year, if you're going to target those fish that are on beds, you're really going to have to go at it strategically. You can't just go out there like a mad bull in a china shop and throwing crankbaits and all kinds of stuff at them. You're just not going to get bit. You're going to spook them before you ever get to them. You really have to work them fish. A lot of times when I get on the bed, I'll work a fish for about 30 minutes, and if she doesn't bite, then I'm going to the next one. So that's basically how I target the fish that are spawning. So now we're going to go over what happens after the spawn. Hey guys, like I said, we're going to talk about what goes on after the spawn. So post-spawn conditions. So basically these are the fish that have already spawned, and you're going to have this going all the way through probably till the first week of it all depends on where you're at. It's kind of hard to say, but like here in Alabama, it'll go on this month and then probably the first week of next month. So you're always going to have your pre-spawners, your spawners, and your post-spawners. So you can target either one of them. So your post-spawners, they're going to set up in similar places like the pre-spawners would. They're going to be really tight to cover and stuff. They're going to suspend. So, you know, they're just real weak and stuff. They're looking for a real easy meal. One of the ways that I target those fish for a real easy meal, this is a Gamakatsu wacky rig hook. And what I do with it, I take something like a Yum Dinger. This is the red bug color. And I will hook it right in the middle. That way, when I cast it out there, I want it sinking really slow. And every now and again, I'm just going to do a little twitch on the end of my rod. So when I cast it out there, it'll just be pop, 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 pop. Just real easy, real subtle. And a lot of times that will Lord have mercy, I can't even talk. It will trigger a reaction bite. Also, the action of the way a wacky rig works, the worm is just kind of closing and opening like that, and then it just flutters down. It's just got a real subtle action. It helps big time as far as bites. If you can't get a bite, you can always throw a wacky rig, and more than likely you're going to score one. My setup, I like a 7-foot medium action Duckett Ghost. This is the older Ghost. You can't purchase these anymore, but a green Ghost is very similar. Pretty much the same thing. So that's basically my setup. Besides my line, I run an 8-pound Seaguar SmackDown braid. This is the high vis braid. I like to be able to see my line, because a lot of times when they hit it, you'll just see your line jump and then it'll tighten up. With this high vis, I can see it immediately. I'm not having to second guess with my fluorocarbon, but I've got my fluorocarbon tied to the braid. If you haven't checked out my video on how to tie your braid to your fluorocarbon, check it out. It's a really good video, very informational. It'll help you secure how to tie them really small knots to your fluorocarbon. But the fluorocarbon that I'm using is the Seaguar Finesse fluorocarbon, 7.3 pound. It's just it's a very strong, lightweight, light diameter fluorocarbon. That's about the only fluorocarbon I throw on my spinning reels and rods. So that's my setup for the pre-spawners. I got one more for you, so stay tuned. Okay, now the last one I was wanting to talk to you about, this is a technique that's widely known. I mean, it's been around for 100 years. Not really that long, but you know what I'm saying. Just a Colorado spinnerbait. Now, I'm throwing this around those post-spawn areas that I was talking about. And the reason I throw the Colorado is not because of the disturbance that it causes in the water or anything like that. It's just I can move this thing super slow. I mean, I can reel it as slow. You can watch paint dry quicker than you can reel this thing. And a lot of times it triggers them bites that are hard to get. And a lot of people, they'll run a real thick diameter line fluorocarbon on their spinner baits. I throw about a 12 to 15 pound. I typically won't go over 15 pounds on my spinner baits. It just seems to give the bait a little bit more action. I don't think it, I mean, the fish ain't really going to see the line either way, but I believe, in my opinion, in my head, that the fish have a harder time noticing, what's going on. So what I like to throw it on is the Duckett Triad. This is a 7-foot medium heavy. Once again, I like the Triads just because it's got the micro guides on it. It's a really affordable rod. It's a really well-made, sensitive rod that I can cast in those areas, make those very accurate casts. That's one thing too, guys. I get asked all the time, and when I carried them kids out on Smith Lake the other day and we caught them big spots and largemouth and stuff, the kid was asking me, how is it every time y'all go out, it's like you know what's going on? Well, it's not necessarily that we know what's going on, or, I mean, we do. We figure out a pattern of what's going on, but the thing about it is we're making high percentage casts. Being accurate with your casting means just about more than anything, more than whatever bait you're using or anything like that. I've seen it so many times. People go down through a bank and they just pop, and then they move. There's no fish on it. You can go right behind them and cast in those really high percentage tight areas that a lot of people are not making cast on and catch fish. So that's got a lot to do with it. But back to the spinner bait. Typically, I'll either throw it with a trailer hook. If I got a lot of trash in the water, I'll throw a swim bait or a crawl chunk on there. That's up to you. That's your opinion on whether you like to use it on spinner baits or not. I do every now and again. It's not an every time thing. But, guys, that is how I target fish and the baits that I use during the pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn. So, we're going to go over what's going on right now as far as all the flooded lakes and stuff like that. So stay tuned. I'm going to cover some stuff that might help you out, might help you catch a lot more fish. Alright, so now we're going to talk about what's been going on all over the country. All of these rains coming in has flooded a lot of lakes. And we dealt with that situation yesterday. And basically what we was doing, we figured out real quick that targeting the fish that were spawning was just not going to work. The water clarity was awful. We had a lot of clouds. There's a lot of pollen on the water. It just about made it impossible to see a fish that was on bed. So we made that quick adjustment to focus on the fish that were pre-spawning and post-spawn. So the fish that were pre-spawning, we found both. The fish that were on the pre-spawn was basically in the mouths of coves. They were on those wind-blown points going into the coves and stuff like that. Now, we target those fish with the jerk bait that I was talking to you about. Now, the jerk bait that I'm talking about is the one that dives like 10 foot. Now, the whole reason that I used the jerk bait that dives to 10 foot is because it had that cloud on the water. Those fish were sitting below. So basically what I did, I threw the shallow running one for just a little while, maybe about an hour, maybe not even that, but I didn't get bit. I didn't get a swap, I didn't get bit, didn't get nothing. I knew there was fish there because the guy that I was fishing with that was in the back of the boat was throwing a Ned rig and getting bit. So I made that quick adjustment, swapping to the one that dives deeper. I worked it, I cast it out there twice and worked it, and bam, got bit. So I was catching fish like that all day on them secondary points, bluff walls leading into the, coves and stuff like that. So, don't be afraid to make that adjustment. So basically, if you're fishing like this was a lowland reservoir, so it's a pretty shallow lake. There's a few bluff walls. There's a lot of secondary points, stuff like that in it, and we were just focused in on those secondary points and stuff like that, and working the jerk baits and the Ned rigs and stuff like that. he was kind of working the Ned rig pretty slow. Now, typically if I throw a Ned rig, I'm gonna use it slow also. But the jerk bait, that was completely different. I was working it very, very fast, making those fish react to the movement of the bait. So the clarity that we was dealing with, it was probably maybe 1.5 feet. So if you have that situation, you're on a lowland reservoir or a highland reservoir, it'll be about the same. Work those secondary points with jerk baits, Ned rigs, wacky rigs, stuff like that, and cover a good bit of water, and just play around with it, and you'll kind of get an idea of what I'm saying. It's really, really hard to explain this stuff without mentioning a specific lake, because every lake's different. Every lake's got something different about it that makes it that lake. So let's move on to rivers. So if I was fishing a river system yesterday and had the similar situations where the water was, 1.5 feet visibility, basically I'm going to get as far away from the current as I can, and I'm going to look for those secondary points that are wind blown. Okay, not looking for the calmest part of that cove, just because I'm not targeting the spawners, because I can't see them. If you can't see them, it's going to be really, really hard to target a spawner. You can still do it, don't get me wrong. You throw your bait in there and you got to work it as slow as possible in tiny areas, tiny pieces, and just kind of work through that area. It takes a very, very long time. I just don't want to spend the time doing that. That's up to you. But you want to target those wind blown secondary points, places that are wind blown that has some type of cover in it, that's in a creek, like like lily pad stems. If you got lily pad stems sticking up and the wind is pushing on like a channel swing going into those stems, that is a great place. It's going to force the bait to go up in that cover, and that's where the bass, the pre-spawners, are going to be sitting, ambushing that bait in them stems. So as far as a highland reservoir, I'm kind of doing the same thing that I would do on a lowland. You got really deep water, so you'll be sitting out over like 100 foot, and then, closer towards the bank, you've got, 15, 25, 30, 40, whatever. Those fish, most of the time, are going to be suspended. It doesn't matter what time of year it is on a highland reservoir, typically, especially if it's a herring fishery, they're going to be suspended. They're just used to suspending, so they're going to suspend. And what I'll do with that is, it's mainly a jerk bait deal. I mean, I'm working a soft jerk bait, and I'm working a hard jerk bait. So the hard jerk baits, I'm using it around, secondary points, bluff walls, hard cover as far as like, maybe a small lay down in the water. But the fluke or the breaking shad, whatever kind of flukes you use, I'm using them to skip up under docks that's back up in creeks. Anything that's in the water that's heavy cover that I can skip up to, that's what I'm using the fluke for. So if you do get in a situation and it does feel overwhelming, the water clarity is awful. And when I say awful, I mean it's like chocolate milk. A lot of times, slow rolling something like a Colorado spinnerbait, like I showed you right there, I typically like either a 1/2, 3/8 ounce, one of the two. I typically start out with a 3/8 ounce. That way I can really, really move it real slow. If I feel like, they're wanting it a little bit faster, then I'll swap to the 1/2 ounce. That way I can move it, faster and keep it in the same depth wherever they're at. So I figure a lot of you have a lot of buckbrush in your lakes or your river systems and stuff like that. So if you're going in creeks and stuff and you see that flooded buckbrush, toss you a spinnerbait and stuff up in there. Drop shot works really well. Use something dark colored as far as if you're going to use worms and stuff like that, because it gives it a bigger profile. It might be a smaller profile, but that bigger profile look in the water with that contrast in the muddy water will help you target the fish, or help the fish target your lure a lot better. So guys, I really appreciate y'all watching. I really appreciate the support. Like I said, if you think this video has helped you in any way, hit that thumbs up button. Go down there at the bottom, hit subscribe. The baits and stuff that I'm talking about in my videos, they'll be linked down in the description. So basically all you got to do is go down there. I'll have a tackle warehouse link. You just hit that, it'll carry you straight to the bait and the products and stuff that I'm talking about. Another thing, a lot of the content that I'm coming out with, it's just based on what I experienced that week of fishing. So, if you have any questions, like I had a guy ask me today about, the waters and stuff being muddy. I wasn't even going to cover any of that. So, if it's something that's happening at your lake, I don't know what's going on at your lake or where you live or anything like that. Please shoot me a message, drop a comment somewhere, something that I can see it, and I will cover it the best that I can. Like I said, everybody's situation is different, but if you're dealing with those muddy water situations and all this flooded timber and stuff, don't let it overwhelm you. Typically what I do, I ignore everything that's flooded, that's, this far under the water. It's irrelevant. There's nothing going on up there. It's just there's water in the grass now. Just move further out. I'm not saying move out to the middle of the cove and start casting, but look in areas, especially when it's real muddy, you want to target those pre-spawn fish because they're going to be the most aggressive. So basically, look in the areas that's going to have the most wind, the cover, the channel swings, the secondary points and stuff like that. That's going to push most of the bait up there. Running spinner baits and flukes and stuff like that, your swim jigs and all that, you're just going to have to experiment with your baits. It all comes down, I can try and tell you how to catch them, but it all comes down to what's your strengths, what you have confidence in, what lake you're fishing. That's a big thing. If I've never been to that lake, I can only tell you from experience that I've dealt with on similar lakes, and it might not have been the exact same experience. So experiment with your baits. And typically what I do, I won't stick with a bait no longer than 30, 40 minutes. So if I'm not getting bit, like if I haven't had a swap or anything, that bait's done. It's done for the day. It's retired. It's going back in the box, and I'll just pick up something different, maybe a different color, something like that. Typically color really isn't that big unless you are dealing with those muddy water situations. I want something bright white. It's going to throw a different contrast in the water. I'm going to throw something dark, okay? That gives it a bigger profile in the water. It looks bigger than what it is. So if I'm throwing the white and I don't get bit, I swap to the black. If I'm throwing the black and I don't get bit, I swap to the white. So it's real simple. I'm not a big color guy. I use basically, dark colors and then light colors. That's about it. I rarely mix. If I'm fishing in clear water situations, I'm throwing natural colors, green pumpkin, watermelon seeds, stuff like that. And then just keep it really simple, guys. Fish your strengths. If you're used to fishing a swim jig and you get bit on a swim jig a lot, think of different ways to work that swim jig or different areas to work that swim jig where maybe you can get a few more bites. But the biggest thing is if the fish can't see it or feel it in muddy water situations, you're probably not going to get bit off of it. Muddy water, they're going to be tied up against cover. They're going to be feeding off their lateral lines. So your vibrations is going to make a big difference. Stuff like your Booyah Melee vibrating jigs, it gives off a completely different vibration. Your Z-Man jackhammers, they give off a completely different vibration. Your Strike King Thunder Crickets, they give off a different vibration. You're just going to have to experiment with what's going on in that situation. Swim jigs, let's just say we're talking about swim jigs. Your trailers are going to determine that vibration. So you're going to have your crawls, that's going to lead to a different vibration. You're going to have your swim baits, that's going to lead to a different vibration, and so on and so on and so on. So you're just going to have to experiment. The biggest thing, focus. Focus on what's going on. So if you're getting swiped at on a lure, but you're not getting bit, the lure could be correct. The color just might be wrong. So, and vice versa, you just really, really need to experiment with what's going on. Go out on those real tough days. The days that nobody wants to go fishing, them are the days that you need to be out there because that's when you're going to start learning this stuff. It all comes by experience. Like I said, I will help you out any way that I can, but there's going to be a lot of times that I just don't know what's going on. That lake, that situation, that moment. That's the reason you have to fish what's going on in that moment and adjust throughout the day. A lot of times I'll be throwing that Pro Blue jerk bait early in the morning and stuff like that, and I'm getting bit, slows down later on the day. Make a quick adjustment, maybe one that's blue and chrome. Start catching them again. It's little stuff like that. Don't get hung up on one thing too often for too long, because other people's going to catch on to it. They're either going to start pressuring the fish, or you're going to pressure the fish yourself, and they're going to come off of that. So you're going to have to make those adjustments as needed. So guys, like I said, I appreciate you watching. Think the video was worth quality? Give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you got any questions about anything, feel free to ask me. I'll cover it in my videos. I'm not going to mention any names or anything like that, if you're worried about that. But if it's something that you need help with right then, absolutely, I'm going to write you back and, help you out with that situation. Just be flexible with me. So, once again, guys, I appreciate you watching.